How many of you are Obama supporters? Oh,
Yeah.
how many are undecided? Okay, good. Hopefully, you know it's more than that. So all you guys do this, like that. Well, that's good. That's kind of why we're here. So, well, I think we've got a little time for some questions afterwards. I guess I'll just share my experiences and how I got involved in something like this. I'm a registered independent, and this is the first time, like I said, that I did anything campaign-related in this manner. And the reason that I got involved in the first place kind of goes back about 4 years. I was living in Texas. Any guys from Texas? 1, 2. All right, good. Couple. I was in Houston. I don't know if you're from Houston, elsewhere, yeah? So I was living in Houston, and there was a friend of mine who was working at a trucking company, making minimum wage, and he was trying to save up money for college. And he got a phone call one day from a company called Halliburton. You guys know Halliburton? So, more than just Halliburton called my friend up at work, and they said that they would pay him $90,000 for a year if he agreed to go to Iraq to drive a truck for the private sector. And he called me, and he called a couple of other friends and asked what we thought he should do. And we didn't really know what to tell him, because overwhelmingly we kind of thought, well, he's in this minimum wage job because he's trying to save up money for college, and it's pretty sad that the world's richest, most powerful country can only offer these two options for our buddy who wants to go to school, and that's either minimum wage or 90 grand in a war zone driving a truck. And it was kind of a sobering moment. I was not a very politically savvy guy, and I was extremely cynical too. And that story just got me even more cynical. So I was kind of like, I don't know what to tell you, that's really depressing. And, 2 weeks later, this was in 2004, so 2 weeks later I had the TV on in the background, I was checking my email, and the Democratic National Convention was on TV. And I heard some guy in the background say, especially after 9/11, we shouldn't be divided between blue states and red states, we should focus on being part of the United States. And I kind of looked up at the TV and I'm like, all right, who's this guy with the big ears and the funny name? And why is he saying all these amazing things? So I watched the rest of the speech, and then as soon as he was done, I just thought, this guy needs to run for president. And he did. So, a couple of years later, when as I was following him in his political career, certainly his career was 2 decades prior to that, but when he decided to run for president, the three things that really jumped out at me, first were his education plan, which includes a $4,000 tax credit for every person who wants to go to college. And that's particularly significant for my friend in Texas, because this was, Barack's plan is $4,000, it's not per family, it's per person. So if you've got 10 brothers and sisters, and all of you get into college, all 10 of you will get $4,000 per year in a tax credit to go to school, and that obviously would have helped my buddy in Texas. And hopefully it still will. The second thing was his opposition to the war in Iraq. I don't know how many of you know this story. I really enjoyed this story, actually. So the senator was running for re-election in the Illinois State Senate when the Iraq War was starting up. And he read all the data on it and said, this is a bad idea for our national security, it's a bad idea for our economy, I don't want to send our troops into harm's way. And he said, he talked to his aides and said, I want to speak out against the war. And his own aides said, Senator, if you speak out against the Iraq War, you're not going to get reelected. The war is testing at an astronomically high approval rating with both Democrats and Republicans. You can't publicly speak out against the war. And Barack said something to the effect of, if lying about foreign policy is the only way to get reelected, then I don't want to get reelected. And he did go to an anti-war rally. He did speak out against the war. And the infamous quote since that you may have heard is the senator saying, I'm not opposed to all wars, I'm just opposed to a dumb war. I thought it was pretty significant knowing what we know now. His whole part of his plan certainly is finding a guy named Osama bin Laden, who we've somehow forgotten about in the last couple of years. So I had a lot of respect for that, and then the third component sort of tied into a whole bunch of things, energy, economy, and healthcare. The senator's got a pretty detailed environmental plan that includes an 80% reduction in carbon emissions by 2050, making sure that we have 5 million new American green jobs that can't be outsourced. I know that North Carolina lost about 200,000 jobs because of NAFTA under the Clinton administration, and Barack wants to bring 5 million jobs here to the United States, green jobs that can't be outsourced. And so for friends of mine who, like I said, are still struggling to pay for school, or friends who don't have health care, like my buddy's senior year in college, we were in a big lecture hall, probably 3 or 4 times the size of this room, and he needed glasses that semester. And I remember he was trying to figure out the math. He didn't have adequate health care, and he was on financial aid, and he couldn't afford both textbooks and eyeglasses. And so he tried to figure out, well, if I show up early to class and sit in the front row, am I going to be able to see the board without getting glasses, and I can afford books? We figured out this weird mathematical equation where if he got the books from the library and photocopied every single page, would he still have money left over for eyeglasses? And the answer, unfortunately, was no. But in the world's richest country, this is still the conversation that's being had. We were kind of outraged that those were the things that were being talked about. And I think a lot of us kind of realized the last 20 years, we've had 2 families in the White House. And I think that they've had some great ideas, especially as an independent. I think there are great things about both of them. They've had great ideas. But they really weren't able to get very much done. They've talked about healthcare for a very long time. They've talked about the economy for a very long time, and they really didn't get much done. If they had, then my friend wouldn't have to make this decision in Texas. My other friend wouldn't have to try and figure out how to buy textbooks and eyeglasses both at the same time. So that's sort of how I got involved in Brock's campaign, knowing that he doesn't take federal lobbyist money, knowing that he's already given 150,000 kids and their parents health care in the Illinois State Senate, knowing that he has the highest environmental rating of anybody running for president. That made me go out to Iowa, which was the first state to have their version of the primary back in January. And I went out there to volunteer for a weekend, and I figured, all right, I'll do a weekend, I'll feel good about myself, feel like I contributed to something great, and then I'll go back to California, and that'll be that. And I spent about the first day and a half in Iowa, ended up meeting incredible volunteers who, in college students, not that I'm suggesting you do this for the general election, you can if you want, but people that had dropped out of school for the year to go work on the campaign. Just basically people who had sacrificed a lot for the greater good, and I thought, all right, I can't just stay for a weekend, I want to stay a little longer. So I ended up moving to Iowa for about a month and a half. Now, the disclaimer that I should give you is that there was a writer's strike in California. So I had no job. So I can't really take full credit.